Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and today I'm coming to you with a From the Vault video. It's been a while since I've made one of these. I've been doing a lot of range reports lately, and that's because I've had so many cool and awesome guns on loan to the channel for me to shoot and try out. And I haven't had a lot of time to show off the guns of my collection that I think are awesome, cool, or collectible. And this is one of those guns. In fact, it is my latest acquisition. In fact, it's really a build. This is a Tommy Built TMP, which is his version of the UMP. So this is a clone of an HK UMP. Of course, it's semi-automatic only, and I bought it as a stripped receiver. So everything else on it, I personally decided what parts I was going to buy and built it out myself. And I'm going to do a whole parts list breakdown in the second half of this video to answer all of the questions I know people will ask me in the comments of, what barrel is that? Where did you get it? Why did you choose that? I'll answer all that hopefully in the second half of this video. But I wanted to show this one off first. So as I said, this is a clone of a UMP9. So it's chambered in 9mm. And if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you know that I did an HK USC to UMP conversion, which is this gun right here, chambered in .45. And Tom Bostic did do the rear end fuse of this one. So this one does have the proper UMP rear end on it. And it's a great gun. This is a wonderful range toy. It's chambered in .45, and that's something that I wanted to change in my second build, which was this one. I wanted something in 9mm, mainly because, number one, I like 9mm in subguns, but also the UMP is the spiritual successor to the HK MP5. And so to have one in 9mm, I thought would just be really cool. Everyone has them in .45, and I see a lot of 40s. I don't see many in 9mm. And that's really the brilliance of this design, is that you can change the caliber by just changing the bolt and the barrel. So I wanted to build a 9mm version of this particular gun, and finally Tom Bostic had the receivers for sale. So I ordered one immediately. I got a really low serial number on this batch. All right, so let me give you a little close-up here of this gun. And obviously, as I said, this is a clone of a UMP9. And for the barrel, I know people are going to ask me, I decided to go with the 3-lug and threaded system, very similar to the MP5 Navy barrel. Now, the original ones had a flange. In fact, this other UMP clone I have here, I went with a .45 flanged barrel, a US-made barrel, and went with a B&T flash hider on it. But the problem with the 9mm flanged barrels is there's almost no accessories available on the US market that would fit it. But there's tons of stuff when it comes to suppressors to either be direct thread or use the HK 3-lug system. So I went with that, and this barrel is from Michael's Machine. They make amazing HK clone stuff. In fact, the chamber of this is fluted just like the original HKs as well. So here is the other side of this firearm here. I mean, it really does look the part. And being that this is a Tom Bostic receiver, let me tell you, the quality is off the chart. If you want to have anything done HK polymer, he is the guy to go to, and he runs a really tight ship there. He gets his work orders out in no time. Sometimes when you're dealing with these specialty gunsmiths, they can take forever, trust me. I've dealt with that with a number of them. But when it comes to him, he has the parts in and out of his shop within days. I am blown away with how fast he works and the quality that he puts out. So I bought this as a stripped receiver. He also did the lower conversion. This is a real HK UMP lower that he converted to semi-automatic only. It is the FBI lower, so it's 2 positions, so it's just safe and fire. And he also opened up the hooks in the front so he could go over a semi-auto receiver. And at the time, he only offered this in black, but I know eventually he'll offer it in flat dark earth as well, and I may pick up one of those. A couple of things that are different with his design versus the actual HK designs, and I'll show you here, is when it comes to these USC to UMP conversions, the ejection ports are designed for .45, and they're a little bit shorter, and they don't have any problems when it comes to ejecting the .45, but on the 40 and the 9mm, there have been times that I've heard that the cases will actually kind of stovepipe in here. So what HK did in their dedicated 40 and 9mm is they widened the ejection port, and that's what Tom Bostic copied on this. So even if I wanted to run a .45 on this, it would run fine, but this is going to have more reliable ejection on the 9 and the 40. So everything on this Comes apart just like a standard UMP. You got the folding stock. It has the single pin in the back. It's not like the USCs if you don't do the rear end fuse where it has a different kind of like push pin system. This is the real UMP spec rear. And so all standard semi-auto UMP stuff will fit into this, like the bolt and the lower. The rail system I have here, and I'll talk about this more in kind of the parts kit. This is an HK parts rail here in the front, the bottom, and the two sides. This is an actual HK top rail, which took me a little bit to source, and one of my subscribers helped me with it. But I haven't gotten this thing to the range yet, but I'm really excited to do so. As I said, I just got the tax stamp back just about 2 weeks ago, and I built this thing out, and this is the first video that I'm really showing it off on. So it's really cool. In fact, because there's so many US parts on this, in fact, very few things on this are actually HK German. You can run real German 9mm mags. And now this one is actually a US made one, but you have no problem with 922R compliance. When it comes to the USC to UMP conversion, you have to run a US mag to make it 922R compliant. So that's what this is. And the magazine counts as 3 parts. You have the body, the follower, and the base plate. So obviously there's a few things aesthetically that's different between the two. One of them would be the vertical foregrip. So on the 45 version, I have the long kind of standard HK one because it doesn't interfere with the magazine. But when you have the curved magazine for the 9mm, which by the way, most people don't know that the 9mm is tapered just a little bit. So that's why it runs a little bit better in the curved mags. I went with the HK parts stubby version of that HK vertical foregrip because it keeps your hand out of the way, and when you take this magazine out, it doesn't interfere with the bottom of the vertical foregrip. So I think it kind of adds a nice touch to the aesthetic and the philosophy of this, of being in 9. So I don't know what suppressor I'm going to run with this yet, but in fact, I don't even know if I'm going to run this thing with an optic, because when it comes to these guns, I think they look awesome just the way that they sit. When I bought this receiver, there was 2 things I was very surprised about, because on his website he said that they were stripped receivers. They actually came with sights already installed and the cocking tube support and the charging handle. And there's a couple of things that are different from the actual HK ones, and I'll talk about that in the parts. The only thing that I changed is I went with a real HK front sight because it's a little bit different than the one I got from Tom Bostic. But besides that, this is the build. So let me give you guys one more close-up of this, and if you guys are interested, stay tuned to the second half of this video, and I will go over every part of this gun and talk about why I chose what I chose. All right, so here we are with the firearm on the table, and we're going to start off with the receiver, which is the most important part of this particular build. And as I mentioned, this is a Tom Bostic or Tommy Built Tactical TMP. It's all marked here, made in the USA, and he has very similar warning labels and markings as the HK UMP. They're just in a slightly different place and of course say different things. The trunnion, of course, is the place where he has serialized the firearm. And in case you guys are wondering, my SBR engraving is on the top of the receiver, and since this is an HK skeletonized rail, you can see it from the top. All right, so now that that is out of the way, let's talk about the magazine. It doesn't matter if you run US made or German made magazines. This one right here is just a US made one. Some people say they are not as reliable as the German ones. The German ones probably cost about $150 to $200 a piece. These are about $49 from HK Parts. So I have mostly these, but I have a few of the German ones. The lower receiver on this particular gun is an HK FBI lower, so it's only 2 position. So when I purchased this, it saved me a lot of time because I don't have to build the lower out. I simply bought it as an FBI lower, which, as I mentioned before, has to be converted. The hooks up here have to be widened because this pin is larger on the semi-autos than it is on the full auto UMP machine guns, which is per ATF regulation. And the auto sear has to be removed, and that area has to be filled in with polymer. So I sent this away, and I think for like $75, Tom Bostic does all of that work for you. Then on the rear end here, we have the traditional HK stock back here. This is pretty iconic for this gun. They do offer other options, especially if you buy the TMP receivers. You can turn these into pistols if you don't want to SBR them, so there are adapters for pistol braces and other types of like M4 stocks. But I like the original, and this is a real HK German stock. I bought it complete, so it already had the button installed and the spring inside. In order to attach it, of course, you have to have a stock pin, which goes right in here. These can actually be a little bit tough to find. This is an aftermarket one that was made in Switzerland, according to HK parts, but sometimes you can find the original German HK ones. This one works absolutely fine. Then you have the push pin right here, which easily comes out. In fact, let me charge the gun real fast, because in order to disassemble this, you really have to have the hammer cocked. So I can pull this out right here, and the entire lower receiver assembly comes off just like it normally would, and that's that whole HK UMP lower I mentioned. And so if you open the stock here, you can now get the whole bolt and bolt carrier out. So here is the recoil spring assembly. This is a US made one, which is interesting that it's different from the German ones, because you can actually take these apart a little bit easier if you want to change the recoil spring. They're both high quality. They're both within, like, you know, HK spec. Then the bolt is a Michaels Machines 9mm bolt right here. To get a real German UMP bolt, it's kind of expensive. You have to get it from a demilled gun, and if you get a full auto bolt, it has to be machined down to fit into a semi-auto receiver. So I thought it was just easier to buy an actual high quality US made bolt. The firing pin in here is a very complicated firing pin. You have to buy that separately. You have to buy the extractor separately, and there's a little pin on the side here, which is a firing pin retaining spring, and that's also another part that you have to buy. So I'm going to try to mention every part I bought individually. I bought the whole firing pin assembly as one unit. You can buy all of the individual parts, but it's just such a complicated spring. It was just worth buying the complete spring and dropping it in. The extractor is easy to put in as well. That's the bolt assembly right there. The barrel that I decided to go with is also a Michaels machine, as I mentioned. It has the 3-lug system on the front, the threaded barrel portion, and the chamber is fluted as well. Another part that's in here that you have to get, and a lot of people don't know, is the ejector. The ejector goes into a little slotted area, and it actually wraps around the barrel. So when you put the barrel in, you have to have the extractor already installed around the barrel and slide it in as one complete unit. And that reminds me, you also need to make sure you buy a barrel pin. Sometimes people overlook that. These are supposed to be one use, but many times people will use them for multiple barrel changes. They are a little bit interesting because they're not your typical roll pin. They're kind of a spring-loaded pin. They're a little bit difficult to get out, and you want to make sure you have a very large roll pin punch to make that happen. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the cocking tube support and the cocking handle were already installed when I got this from Tom Bostic. And what's a little bit different about this one compared to a real German one is this one uses what appears to be like a hex head screw to hold in the cocking lever, where the HK USC actually has a roll pin. So you can't punch the roll pin through into this area in here to exchange it. So that's just the system he has. It's a little bit different. I actually like this design a little bit better, but it's not authentic. The top rail of this gun is a real HK UMP rail. It is the skeletonized version, as I mentioned, with the extension. Many of the modern HK UMP rails don't have this little extension portion here, and sometimes people will wonder, that rail looks a little bit elevated. Is that correct? The answer is yes. That is just the way HK designed it. You also have it on the side rails as well, and this side rail, bottom rail, and the other side rail here I got from HK parts, and it is a pretty authentic looking US made rail system. As I mentioned as well, this is an HK style stubby vertical foregrip and an HK hand stop here on the front. The front sight, I replaced the Tom Bostic one with a real HK UMP front sight, which you will also need a roll pin for that. The Tom Bostic one, it had a simple little post inside, where the UMP ones, the post is kind of three-dimensional. It's not just a stick. It's actually this elongated portion, inside of the upper sight, and since this is only about $11, I thought it was completely worth it to change it to a real HK front sight. And just kind of looking over this, I think that is everything. Oh yeah, the rear sight already came installed, but you can buy these for about $20, and you can get the whole sight assembly, both German or US made. They're all pretty simple and easy to put in. So you have all the different parts, the springs, the flip up portion, the bolts and screws, all that's easy to install. And all of the hardware that holds on the rails also came with the rails, but you can buy all of these bolts separately as well. So I think that is everything I put on the build. So if anybody has any questions about what I put on this or my choices, you can just ask me in the comment section below. Most of this I got from HK Parts. The receiver I got from Tom Bostic and Tommy Built Tactical, and a few of the parts I had to get from Numeric Gun Parts, because finding UMP parts is a little bit difficult and you have to go to multiple sources depending on what's in stock and where. So that's it. My TMP9 UMP9 clone. So there you go. So that is the parts list and a little from the vault video. All right guys, so let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching.